You're watching UATV English. We broadcast from the heart of Europe, Ukraine's on air. You asked us to make online translations. We did such once at the beginning of the Russian full-scale invasion. So we are coming back. My name is Anna Nichenko. Hello and welcome. Today we will talk about necessity of the world's support of Ukraine. On the eve of the NATO summit in July, Western leaders are negotiating a response to Ukraine's calls to offer it a clear plan for joining the alliance after the war. According to NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, there are three important elements the allies intend to give Kyiv. In the particular dimension, a long-term package to help it transition to NATO doctrines and equipment standards, and the political route, the finalization of the Ukraine-NATO Council agreement. We are talking about the enhanced format of cooperation.
That is why this will be discussed in the weeks leading up to the Vilnius summit, and I am in favor of providing substantial and powerful security guarantees to Ukraine for two reasons. Ukraine protects Europe today. It gives Europe security guarantees. The second reason is that there is so much military equipment in Ukraine right now that it is in our interest to extend security guarantees.
The allies agree, according to the NATO Secretary General, a long-term assistance package will bring Ukraine in line with NATO standards in a few years. The bloc also intends to intensify political ties between Kyiv and the alliance. We are talking about an expanded format of cooperation.
What we are discussing is how to move Ukraine closer to NATO. And there are ongoing consultations, and I'm not in a position to preempt the outcome of those consultations. Allies will address Ukraine's membership aspirations. Allies are working on a multi-year package of assistance for Ukraine. We're also working to establish a new NATO-Ukraine Council to jointly consult on security issues of mutual concern. The decisions we will take in Vilnius will bring Ukraine closer to NATO.
According to the Secretary General of the Alliance, Germany plays an important role both in supporting Ukraine and in the overall defense of the North Atlantic Alliance. In particular, Bundeswehr accepted a $10 billion military aid package for Ukraine last month. In addition, Berlin intends to send thousands of its troops to reinforce the eastern flank of NATO. To strengthen the air defense of Ukraine, Germany, in cooperation with America, intends to transfer to Ukraine another 45 Gepard self-propelled anti-aircraft guns. Also, by the end of this year, Ukraine will receive 2 IRIS-T SLM anti-aircraft missile systems and 4 more next year.
We took all the necessary preparations for us to reach the 2% goal. We do this with the federal budget, but also by using the special fund. I assume once all countries in Europe have achieved this and all members in the transatlantic alliance, this will lead to a tremendous increase in our defense capabilities. I mean, it's a massive increase in defense spending. And if you look at all the many other countries and factor this in, countries that also need to increase their spending for them to reach the 2% objective, then if you add all of this up, this will result in a massive increase of defense capabilities for NATO.
Republican Senator Jim Risch from Idaho believes that there is a fairly high probability that Ukraine will receive long-range ATACMS missiles.
I think the possibility is quite high. I've said from the very beginning to give Ukraine everything that scores, as long as it's not nuclear. Any other weapons that we have should be made available to the Ukrainians, whether it's F-16 fighters or ATACMS missiles, everything we have. U.S. Senator Jim Risch in an interview with Voice of America.
About necessity of the military help, I'll talk to my guest, Anna Brodsky-Krotkina, journalist, professor, the head of the Slavic program at the University of Washington and Lee, USA. Hello and welcome.
Hello, nice to see you.
Nice to see you again. No doubt, Kyiv must receive all the military support it needs to put an end to Russia's war against Ukraine and the entire world. What's your assessment of the military and other help of Ukraine to Ukraine?
Well, it's important, of course, to think that military help is not the only help that Ukraine will need. It will need a massive amount of reconstruction help. Pretty much everything has to be reconstructed in the eastern part of Ukraine. Housing, factories, roads, bridges, everything is going to need some input. It's important to look at the history at that moment and think about Truman's Marshall Plan. This will be something akin to Marshall Plan that was basically institutionalized in 1948. And what happened during that plan? Truman involved massive amount of private enterprise. And in fact, maybe a fact not well known right now, much forgotten, that in charge of that plan was a guy named Paul Hoffman. And he was the head of the Studebaker Corporation. That was the most powerful corporation at the time. So what was he doing? He was blending private and public efforts and public and private funds. And this is exactly what Biden will have to do or the next administration will have to do in reconstructing Ukraine. It's to build public and private cooperation. Now, this is not an easy task. It was not easy in 1948. Shockingly, only 56% of Americans supported Marshall Plan because the tendencies of isolationism, meaning, I only care about my own problems, that is actually quite prevalent. That has always been important in the United States. So what does Biden need to do? Again, he needs to build public opinion. He needs to build general public consensus that rebuilding Ukraine is in vital interest of the United States, just like it was done in 1948. No difference in that respect.
Exactly, talking about rebuild, in particular, how should the world support Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction?
Well, just Blinken just very recently spoke about the needs of future reconstruction, and what's important, and Blinken very much underlined it, is that reconstruction cannot happen unless there is safety. Ukraine has to be safe from Russian attacks. Otherwise, and just a pragmatic reason, you will not have private investors investing in building, say, a factory, because it can be just blown up in a second.
Our viewers write, every NATO country needs to support Ukraine's entry into the alliance world. What's actions, they ask. They say that I hope that at least NATO needs Ukraine just the same as Ukraine needs NATO. Your opinion, what do you think about this, about NATO needs Ukraine the same as Kyiv needs alliance?
Of course, NATO needs Ukraine, and that's a pretty obvious situation. Ukraine is a shield. It's a shield right now it's a shield between Russia, and we know that Russia is hugely aggressive, and the rest of Europe. If that shield cracks, we know what happens when a shield cracks. It will be a disaster for Europe. There is very, very little doubt about that. And we have seen, again, going back a little bit into history, we've seen in 2008, President Bush wanted NATO to accept Ukraine. Who objected? It was Germany's Angela Merkel who most strenuously objected. She had an interesting objection. That is interesting in retrospect, in its short-sightedness. We should not accept Ukraine into NATO because we should consider Russian security concerns. It's a code language. What was that code language about? The code language was about allowing Russia, that is allowing large empire, to keep the sphere of influence. And right now, it's a very important thing that consideration has been dissolved by history. Russia does not need provocation to attack. It will attack whether it's provoked, whether it's not provoked, whether it's threatened, whether it's not threatened. It has its own agenda, and the agenda ultimately, as we see it from 1999, the agenda is perpetual war. That's how regime keeps itself in power. So it was very short-sighted on the part of Angela Merkel, and it was also ideologically very wrong. An empire should not keep its sphere of influence. This is just not right. So that has fallen by wayside. Thank God it's no longer an issue. But now Biden is very hesitant. And why is Biden hesitant? Biden is fearful. Is Biden fearful of Putin? Possibly. But he also is worried about making commitments that America will, for one reason or the other, have difficulties fulfilling. And there is a precedent for that. America did not fulfill Budapest Agreement. 1994 Budapest Agreement that guaranteed safety nonetheless was not fulfilled. So here is Biden. On one hand, he desperately needs to provide security. Ukraine is a massive investment of America. America indeed involved a massive amount of funds. So security is very important for the United States. It's very important for the political party to show we've invested a lot of money, and that investment is paying off. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, and we constantly have this double position on practically on every issue, two sides. On the other hand, Americans are fearful, and Biden is fearful that Americans will not be able to commit to Ukraine as fully as NATO would require. So there is this tension. Will Biden yield? Rumors have it that yes, he will yield. And at least to some extent. There's another very, very important thing here, that in order to provide Ukraine with security, it would be very useful to codify its involvement with NATO's commitment. It should be, and here I excuse my language because Ukraine doesn't want commitment. It wants much more. It doesn't want assurances. It wants commitment. So that's a very different, very interesting distinction. So, but this commitment, it's also only a word. It needs to be codified. Why does it need to be codified? Because we do not know who the next president will be. And we have no doubt, nobody has any doubt, that Trump or any other Trumpist is definitely not pro-Ukraine. They're basically pro-Russia. They're basically supporters of Putin. And while they support Putin, Putin supports them. So whatever.
Yeah, just your conclusion, please. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Whatever we is agreed upon now should be ultimately written in stone to protect Ukraine from the exigencies of American policies.
Thanks a lot for your explanations, for your thoughts. I'll remind to our viewers, Anna Brodsky-Krotkina, journalist, professor, the head of the Slavic program at the University of Washington and Lee, USA. So, NATO needs Ukraine the same as Ukraine needs NATO. Other countries also need Ukraine because on a battlefield, we protect not only ourselves, but also these other countries. Russia is a global threat. Putin wants to kill not only Ukrainians. For example, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant was mined by Russians. This is the threat for many countries, and that's why they must be stopped.
I remember how the Russian Federation behaved. Everything they could not achieve by pressure in those hours-long negotiations, they tried to do by military means on February 24th last year. Ukraine will never compromise on the territorial integrity of our country. There will be no negotiations with the Russians as long as their troops are here.
That's all. Thank you for watching and that you are interested in these topics. It was UATV English from the heart of Europe. Subscribe us, it really matters. See you.